Okay, welcome back, year 11. This is the video for the very first question in section B on paper 3. That's the Weimar and Nazi Germany paper. As I said before in some of the other videos, you have to do section B chronologically. So you have to start with 3a, then go through to B, C, and finish with 3d. The reason for that is because the questions all build on each other. So we start off looking at the two sources, B and C in this one. Then you move on to the two interpretations, and then by the end of the paper, you're combining what you've learned from the sources and the interpretations. So anyway, this is the first question in section B, and it's a question that lots of students really don't like. However, I am going to show you quite a quick way of answering this question using the acronym COP. Okay, this is the acronym that we're going to be using in order to answer this question and to try and get as many marks as we can. It is quite rare for students to get 8 out of 8 on this question. I've been marking this paper for a good few years now, and I certainly don't see that many 8 out of 8s. However, I will show you just how easy it is to get certainly 6 out of 8 on this, and then demonstrate to you what you need to be doing to get that 8 out of 8. Now, we're going to be using COP. COP stands for contents. I'm going to put OK, that stands for own knowledge, and provenance. Okay, this is what's going to guide our paragraphs. Now, before we do that, though, we need to look at the question itself and start to pick apart what it's really asking us to do and what it really means. So I'm going to get my highlighter. This is something that you absolutely need to use in your exam. It's really important that you're going through and highlighting the important parts of the question so that you can stay focused. So this is a question that asks you how useful two sources are in relation to an inquiry. So this word useful just means helpful. So how much do these sources help you if you're trying to find out about a particular topic? Now we need to look at sources B and C. So it's really important that we talk about both of them. We're not comparing them. That's the really important thing with this question. Do not, I don't know why I've joined those two words up. Do not compare. So we're not trying to say source A is more useful than source B or source B is less useful than source A, anything like that. You're taking each source in turn and using COP on each source. Okay, you do not need to compare them, and if you do, you will not get marks for it. So we're looking at helpfulness, at usefulness. Basically, why should or shouldn't we trust the sources, and what can they tell us? Now, the focus of this question, the thing that we're trying to find out about, is always at the end of this first sentence. So for us, it's support for the Nazi Party in the years 1924 to 28. All right. So we're trying to find out as much as we can about that topic from these two sources. Now, before we begin, the two sources will disagree with each other. They will contrast. Okay. So up here, I'm just going to do a little plan. I like to do this sometimes. You don't have to. I'm going to put B and C. And then we can make notes about each source if we want to up here. All right. They will be different. Okay. So I'm just going to do a little one of those. I don't know what to call that, but it's demonstrating to me that these two are going to have a different opinion on the source material. And then to finish our question, it says, explain your answer using sources B and C and your knowledge of the historical context. So obviously we're experts. It's up to us to try and decide whether these sources are genuine, whether they're telling the truth. Should we trust them fully? Is there any information that they're leaving out? It's that kind of thing. Now, mathematicians and scientists typically don't like this question because they're quite used to having a right and a wrong. This question does not require you to decide whether the source is ultimately useful or ultimately useless. It just requires you to have a discussion around these three things and what is good about the source in terms of being able to trust it, and are there, if any, reasons for us to maybe not trust it that make it unreliable. Now, you will get with your paper a sources and interpretations booklet. It should be separate, or it will be at the back of your paper. And here we go. It says up here, sources and interpretations for use with section B. So we know we're in the right place. So we've got source B here and source C here. More often than not, you'll have one that's visual and one that is written. Not always, but more often than not. Okay, and like I said, they're gonna disagree with each other in some kind of way. It's up to us to try and find that. That is the topic of questions 3B, C, and D. All right, and we start off looking at that here with these sources. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the C, the content. What can I see or what can I read? And what can I find out from that about support for the Nazi Party in the years 1924 to 28? So what are these sources telling me about that? So I'm going to highlight anything that tells me about the level of support. So I'm going to start off with source B. So Hitler and the Nazis were hardly ever mentioned in conversation. That doesn't sound like they're supported well, does it? So I'm just going to annotate that. That shows that they're not popular, I think. The only way that they are spoken about is in jokes about the Munich Putsch. Okay, so they're laughed at. Okay, so I'm going to go back here and just add this. So source B is saying that they are not supported. They're even laughed at. Okay, let's carry on. It gives us some facts here, or what we think are facts. We'll have to decide that for ourselves. In the elections of May 1928, only 810,000 out of 31 million people voted for the Nazis. Again, that does not show popularity, does it? That does not show that people support them. In contrast, the Social Democrat Party received more than 9 million votes. Okay, so socialism is much more popular. There was a wonderful feeling of excitement in Germany in those days. Life in Berlin and Munich seemed more free, more modern, more exciting than in any place I've ever visited. The young people of Germany wanted to live life to the full, in complete freedom. Most Germans you met believed in democracy and peace. Now, it's only these bits at the top that are explicitly telling me whether they had support or didn't. But these bits down here are kind of telling me why the Nazis don't have support. So this tells me why they don't have support. And in a minute, when we get to our own knowledge, we can sort of start to fact check this. We can sort of start to say, well, I think this source is actually telling the truth because I know this to be true. And then we can maybe talk about Stresemann and the way that he helped Germany recover. Okay, now I'm happy with that, so I'm going to leave it where it is. I'm then going to move on and I'm going to do the same thing for source C. Now, source C is different, it's a visual source. So we're going to be annotating this as opposed to highlighting. So again, I'm looking for anything in here that demonstrates that the Nazis were either supported or not supported. Now, remember, I said that these sources are going to contrast. They're going to give a different opinion to each other. And automatically, or straight away, I should say, we can see that this source gives a very different picture. This one, if we were to believe it, says that Hitler has a lot of support. And I'm just going to annotate how I can see that. So, lots of supporters. And if you look, many of them, if not all of them, are doing the Heil Hitler salute. Okay, he looks powerful, doesn't he? Clearly very well supported. Okay, so I've got two contrasting ideas here. I'm just going to fill in my little plan over here as well. Many supporters doing the Hitler salute. Okay, so I can see how they contrast with one another now. This one's saying lots of support, well, that's the message I get. Hitler's obviously at the front. And then here, not much support. They're a joke, and the country's doing well without them. Okay, that's what it seems to say. So I've done some work with the sources now. I now need to start putting this into words. And again, we're going to use COP to guide us. Now I'm going to show you how to do the first source. So we're going to do source B on here. And then it'll be up to you if you want to go away and practice source C by yourselves. I'm going to give you some sentence starters now, and I'm going to show you the kinds of things that you might want to say in response to this question. So we always want to try and focus on why the source is useful. So what it can tell us about the focus of the question. Remember, this is our focus of the question. Support for the Nazi Party. Did they have support? So I'm going to start off by saying source B, because we're starting with the first one. Source B is useful as it shows me that Hitler was in fact not supported very well in this period. Now, because I'm focusing on the content, I now need to prove my point. I need to try and prove the thing that I'm suggesting. So if I'm suggesting that actually he wasn't well supported, I then need to prove that with a quote. So this is where the highlighting comes in handy. I'm going to go back and I'm going to find a part here that proves that. So, for example, the source states that, let's go for this first part where they're hardly ever mentioned apart from in jokes. So, for example, the source states that the Nazis were hardly ever spoken about in conversation. What does it say? Except in jokes. Okay. For example, the source states that the Nazis were hardly ever spoken about in conversation except in jokes. This clearly shows that the Nazis were not only poorly supported, but even laughed at. Okay, so I've now spoken about the content of this source. I've said what it can tell me about how the Nazis were supported and whether they were supported. Okay, so I'm going to now tick off. I'm just going to put a B there because I've spoken about that now. Okay, I can move on. Now I just need to think about what I already know and compare that to the source. Does it prove the source to be true? Does it maybe make me not want to trust the source? How does my own knowledge compare to what the source is telling me? Okay, so I'm going to have a look at it again. So I know that the Nazis were definitely viewed as a failure after the Munich Putsch. Okay, so I could talk about that. I also know that the Social Democrats were the most popular party at this time, so I know that's accurate as well. This part at the bottom I also know is accurate because it's talking about how Germany recovered during this period. So I think that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say I know that most of the information in this source is true. And then I'm going to say how I know that and what the information is that tells me that. So I'm always going to start I know that because I'm talking about things that are coming from my own brain. I know that this period was indeed a period of growth and excitement in Germany as a result of Streseman's successful reforms. Therefore, so now I need to bring it back to usefulness. Therefore, this adds to the, I'll use a big word here, validity of the source, making it potentially more useful. So what I'm basically saying is because I can prove that a lot of the information in this source is accurate, that makes me want to trust the source more because I know that it's telling the truth in many ways. So that makes me want to trust it more. That doesn't make me want to say, hang on a minute, this source is lying, because I can prove by using my own knowledge, let me take that out, I've done it, by using my own knowledge that most of this source is true. Therefore, that makes the source more useful and potentially more accurate. the only thing I need to talk about now is the provenance of the source, and this is